and at 10, Werewolf by Night. The first time we've seen Moon Knight in the comics actually wasn't in his own series, but rather Werewolf by Night number 32. He faced off against Jack Russoff, aka Werewolf by Night, making Russoff his enemy. However, technically, Moon Knight was the villain in this scenario, hence its placement at number 10. Jacob Russoff is a werewolf, but unlike his dad, also a werewolf, Jack could control when and where he would transform, not just under a full moon. He had much more control over his abilities in werewolf form as well, except for when there was a full moon, because that's when Jack would be at his strongest, but also completely out of control, which is a concept that sounds a lot like a D&D character. His superpowers include werewolf physiology, along with superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, stamina, a healing factor, and of course a hairy body packed with a nasty set of teeth and killer claws, something the ladies love. And at 9, Morpheus. Morpheus first appeared in Moon Knight number 12 back in the early 80s, and he's one of the rare horrifying characters that people actually feel sympathy for. Despite his vampiric appearance, he should not be mistaken for Morbius. This is a different person. The character who's getting the standalone movie, no one knows what universe it's in. Yeah, Morbius is indeed a pseudo-vampire, while Morpheus is something else entirely. His real name is Robert Markham, and he got sick from an old virus that caused segments of his DNA to be inhibited by the virus. He sought medical attention, and Dr. Peter Alron gave him an untested drug to help him, but it all backfired, causing Markham to change dramatically appearance-wise while also taking away Markham's need for sleep and giving him unfathomable psionic powers. However, the lack of sleep rendered him crazy, after which he had taken the alias Morpheus after the Olympian god of dreams. With his newfound powers, Morpheus sought revenge upon Alron, only to encounter Moon Knight in the process. And at 8, Count Nefaria. While Count Nefaria wasn't purely evil at first, his desire for more wealth and power is ultimately his downfall, and he's very nefarious. He has been around for years and years, fighting almost every single Avenger he can think of. He also encountered Moon Knight after Mark Spector moved to LA and joined the West Coast Avengers, primarily becoming his villain. Count Nefaria is immortal and has an unfathomably strong healing factor, because, you know, he's immortal. He received energy projection from the Living Laser, strength from Power Man, and speed from Whirlwind, all amplified 100 times. He can lift well over 100 tons, fly over 5,000 miles per hour, teleport, leech another person's energy, and so much more. However, it's likely that if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you knew about this guy, so he's not very high on the list. But honestly, not having known much about Moon Knight before this list, aside from he looks freaking awesome, all these villains are pretty new to me, so it's pretty cool getting to see all the characters that this guy has faced, and hopefully you at least hear about a few that you didn't know about. But no complaining if you're a Moon Knight superfan, okay? That's not allowed. That's cheating. And at 7, Dead Zone. There are a few characters more 90s than Dead Zone, but he has his appeal. Dead Zone sort of emulates the classic Iron Man villain Whiplash with his electrical whips, but he's less a mercenary than just an ideological warrior. He seeks to punish sinners by lashing them to death, that has him run afoul with Moon Knight. Dead Zone first appeared in Moon Knight's solo title and is pretty evenly matched for the character. When Moon Knight tried to take him down with his adamantium, Dead Zone catches it and then turns it around on him. There is very little on the wiki about him, and honestly I don't know what else I could say about him, but he's trying to do what Moon Knight does, but going about it in an absolutely abysmal way. Like, come on bro, really? Whips? Like, I get that they're OP in like the Spider-Man PS4 game, but seem seriously underpowered in real life or in comic books, unless they need them for plot or you're into that kind of thing. And at 6, Black Spectre. Carson Knowles was a veteran who returned home without applause. His job had been passed on and his wife left him with their son. He barely got by as a delivery man and found out his son was killed by phone. After his car was stripped for parts and a mugger accosted him, Knowles snapped and beat the man nearly to death. Seeking to destroy the city that treated him so badly, Carson Knowles ran as a dark horse candidate for mayor on his father's name and political connections. He also created a second identity as Black Spectre, beating and blackmailing the local precinct boss to support Knowles, and then in a fight with Moon Knight his mask slipped, but Moon Knight was unable to convince anyone that the mayoral candidate Knowles and Black Spectre were the same person. Eventually though, Moon Knight defeated Black Spectre in public, and his assistant Marlene Arlone uncovered Knowles' corrupt plans for the city and his political office. So at least he lost. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight's real name is Randall Spector, Mark's younger brother. He was envious of Mark his entire life, which turned him into a horrible criminal. There was a murderer on the streets killing nurses called the Hatchet Man, so Moon Knight used his girlfriend Marlene as bait to catch the killer. The plan worked, but Marlene perished. Yeah, and to make matters even worse, the Hatchet Man was revealed to be Randall. Randall later joined the cult of Khonshu, which ultimately resulted in him receiving the same powers as his brother Mark. However, he ended up choosing to use them for evil, donning the pseudonym Shadow Knight. Because, you know, every character needs to have a reverse version of themselves. Reverse Flash, Dark Archer, Bizarro. It was devastating for Mark to fight his brother and ultimately kill him by slitting his throat with a throwing crescent. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially when you learn that Mark tried protecting Randall their entire lives. But then again, he killed your girlfriend, so...
At number 10, we have Mindworm. First introduced in 1974's Amazing Spider-Man number 138, Mindworm is a mutant who has the ability to absorb the psionic energy from his targets and sap their energy, and absorb that energy for himself. The first time he uses this power is on his own mother, who he accidentally kills by draining all of her energy in one go. This traumatic event drives his father into shock, causing him to run into traffic, killing him as well. Mindworm has a tough life in and out of orphanages and homeless shelters, and eventually has a run-in with Peter Parker while he's living in a neighboring apartment. But when Parker notices Mindworm's attempts at draining his psionic energy, he knocks out the villain, who is then taken to prison. Soon after this, Mindworm reforms and becomes good, but is killed by a street gang after having never actually killed anyone using his powers other than his own mother. Honestly, it's a really sad story, and I don't know why they had to do him that bad, but that's Mindworm. Pretty obscure. At number 9 is Spider-Side. First introduced as Spider-Man in the Clone Saga, Spider-Side appears as a super-jacked, massive version of Spider-Man that has Ben Reilly and Peter Parker wondering even more who the real Spider-Man is. But soon, this third Spider-Man soon goes mad and becomes Spider-Side, attacking the other heroes in a raving frenzy. He seems to be capable of some pretty nifty shape-shifting, as though he has some kind of symbiotic physiology, but ultimately he's left in the annals of the 90s and not really revisited again after the Clone Saga. My best guess is that he was just too OP and or confusing as a character. At number 8 is the Living Brain. This is one of the oldest Spider-Man villains in general, and especially on this list, and one that very few people ever reference these days. First introduced in 1964's The Amazing Spider-Man number 8, the Living Brain is a supercomputer that continually gets hacked by villains to attack Spider-Man and the people of New York City. Basically, this is what the height of AI looked like back in the 60s, making this villain not just obscure in the world of Spider-Man comics, but in the real world as well, as we are now in 2022. He looks like a dishwasher with arms, if we're being honest. But he sort of makes his rounds a little more than one might expect such a silly villain to. So I held him back on the list a little bit. At number 7 is Typeface. This guy really confuses me because although his name is ridiculous and he doesn't actually have any powers at all, he still shows up a decent amount in various comics. First appearing in the year 2000, Gordon Thomas is radicalized after he returns from the Vietnam War and his wife immediately leaves him, taking their child with her. He then becomes a sign maker and goes off to be a criminal with letters drawn on his face. And he actually defeats Spider-Man during their first encounter by throwing letters at him, which doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. But what's even weirder is that he returns as a good guy during the Civil War frontline storyline and fights alongside some pretty well-respected heroes like Battlestar and Solo before he's ultimately killed by Venom while facing off against the Secret Avengers. At number 6 is the Ringer. This is one of those characters that we can basically assume was named before his powers were decided, because ultimately it's a pretty ridiculous power and suit design, especially in the early days. He basically just shoots rings at his enemies, which can do anything between entrapping the target to exploding on impact to freezing. The first time we really encounter the Ringer, he's taken out pretty quickly by not Spider-Man but Nighthawk, losing some teeth in the battle and spending a lot lot of time in jail. He's then eventually killed by Scourge when he's called to a bar with a group of other villains, which ends up being a trap. Later, however, it's revealed that he doesn't actually die and is revived by AIM agents who give him a cyborg body, and he's renamed Strikeback. With a big enough power boost and a totally different mantle to make him a whole different character from the Ringer is essentially lost to obscurity, making him one of the most long-lost Spider-Man villains of all time. At number 5, we have Frank Oliver, aka Kangaroo. This guy's power is basically artificially enhanced legs. And aside from that, he's just known to be a very skilled boxer who is banned from the sport after seriously injuring one of his opponents. But the way that he gets this sort of lame jumping power is when Jonas Harrow approaches him and offers him the powers in exchange for his cooperation in a highly dangerous heist. While he's infiltrating the Hudson nuclear laboratories to steal some radioactive something or other, Spider-Man swoops in to try and stop him. Well, not stop him, but to save his life, because the room he's breaking into is so radioactive that it disintegrates him immediately upon entry, and Spider-Man watches on in horror as this happens. The Kangaroo Mantle has a couple other appearances, but as far as I'm concerned, this event marks the end for the villain and leaves him behind in the void of obscurity.
Number 10, Gorgon. If you remember the weirdest DC Multiverse Superheroes video, which you should check out, I talked about a pastiche of the Incredible Hulk in DC Comics called Big Baby from Earth 8. He was part of a team called the Retaliators, who were supposed to be a joke version of the Avengers. This universe also had a team of villains called the Extremists, and on that team was a Dr. Octopus type character named Gorgon. While Gorgon did utilize technological enhancements, I think his octopus likeness comes in the form of his prehensile hair. The hair tentacles he uses and his role as a scientist, mixed with his weight and oddly familiar glasses, all come together to really evoke a Dr. Octopus likeness, which is just weird enough to make me double take. He is also familiar enough that I can't really put him any higher on this list, so there's that. Number 9, Dex Star. Or Dexstar, or Dexter, or Dexstar, Dexstarer. Cats can be ruthless, cold, and scary at times, I'll admit that. But while the Red Lantern of Sector 2814, Dexstar, is an irrationally rage-filled kitty, it's all because he loved his owner. Dexstar's origin shows the cat Dexter with his owner when she is attacked by robbers who broke into her home. While Dexter tried his best to scratch the attacker, he ended up ending the life of Dexter's owner. When the police showed up on the scene, Dexter was kicked out into the streets so as to not contaminate the scene. Now, 2 rascals from the streets found Dexter when he was trying to sleep, put him in a sack, and threw him into a river. Now that is one hell of a sequence of events, and all this happening filled the poor little kitty with enough rage that it caught the attention of Atrocitus, who called out to him and made him a Red Lantern. With this newfound power of the Red Lantern ring, the Rage Kitty exacted his sweet revenge on the hoodlums and flew to say goodbye to his owner one last time, saying, in his little cat language, "I find who hurt you, I kill. I, good kitty." I love this cat, but I also wouldn't dare mess with it. Ever. Number 8, Prometheus. Heroes and villains with no powers always seem to be some of the most powerful. It's strange. Take Prometheus. After seeing his criminal parents pass at the hands of police, he vows a vendetta on any form of justice. A vendetta that would push him to be able to defeat the whole Justice League single-handedly. He shot the Martian Manhunter with a dart that turned his power against him and set him on fire. He infected Steel's armor with a computer virus which commanded the suit to damage the Watchtower. He hypnotized the Huntress into unconsciousness. He attacked Green Lantern with a neural chaff that rendered his ring useless. He trapped the Angel Zariel in limbo. He tricked the Flash into believing that he had planted motion-sensitive devices that would explode if the Flash used his powers. And he defeated Batman in hand-to-hand combat. That's probably the most nuts thing on this list. His origin is very similar to Batman's. After his parents were dispatched from the mortal plane, he would travel the globe training and becoming the ultimate combat machine. But he also attended the top universities, learning as much as he could. He eventually sets up a base in the Ghost Zone. And from here, he built an armor that could download information on any opponent's fighting style, kind of reminiscent of Taskmaster's ability. He is kind of crazy capable, and his vendetta on any kind of justice plus his Batman likeness just makes him kind of a little strange to me. but also terrifying. Number 7, Earth 17 Superman. On Earth 17, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe, Overman, was the first, with the other superheroes being spawns of his DNA. Now that may be weird, but that ain't the weird part. He also doesn't really seem like a villain yet, does he? Well, after contracting a disease, contracting a disease from another person, yes, like that kind of disease, he goes insane and destroys the Justice League and reduces his world to rubble. He then gets his filthy paws on a doomsday boom boom that he intends to use on Earth 17 and wipe it out. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, just like DC tried to destroy such a naughty Superman story. Even having different iterations of Overmans who were different, like an Overman who became allied with the Axis powers in World War II. But the internet never forgets DC Comics, and people like me exist to remind everyone of the things you published into this world. I am sorry. Sort of. Thanks for the content. Number 6, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Look, I talked about Batmite when discussing heroes, and he wasn't even really a hero. So how can I not mention the first 5th dimensional imp in this video? Plus he's got a fun name. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a reality warping imp obsessed with Superman, who, just like his rival Batmite did with Batman, simply seeks to annoy the hell out of Superman and just prove he is smarter than him. Which is good, because he has a level of power that in other hands could cause the entire end of the multiverse. More on that later though. He can do almost anything imaginable if he wishes it. And his only weakness really is being convinced or tricked into saying his name backwards to send him back to the 5th dimension, which, if you're trying to say it correctly, is honestly a superpower in and of itself. Clitopizixum. I got it. Mxyzptlk.
And for Midnight Man. Originally a collector of art, Anton Mogart would commit robberies at the stroke of midnight to build his collection. When Moon Knight stops him, he seemingly drowns in a river, but instead, he ends up becoming deformed by the waste found within the sewers. Then he goes insane and starts collecting trash, and teams with Bushman to defeat their sworn enemy. When Midnight Man finds out he's dying from cancer, he decides to find his son, hoping that he can share some of his final moments with him. Mogart does what he can to stop his son from turning to a life of crime like he once did, and in the wake of his death, he becomes the hero Midnight. It didn't last, and he ended up becoming a cyborg for the Secret Empire, which, while sounding bad, I think it would be kinda cool, like, to be a cyborg. Like, as long as I still have, like, my free will, and my programming isn't controlling me, because that just doesn't sound like fun. Like, I want to be able to turn my arm into a giant cannon. That'd be great. Someone tries to mug me, I'm just like, sorry. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Seth Falcon. He belongs to a Scottish sect of Knights Templar and has several amazing powers. I'll never do that accent again. Falcon first appeared in Mark Spector Moon Knight number 43. Seth Falcon is immortal, has superhuman strength and stamina, but his strongest power is his touch. Using his clawed fingers, Falcon can drain the life force out of any living being, aging them in the process. If he holds his grip for long enough, Seth can drain the entire life out of somebody, all of it, turning them into a rotted skeleton. However, there's a catch. Due to biofeedback, the draining process backfires if Seth uses it on anybody who shares his DNA code, even partially. Simply put, he can't drain his relatives because it causes the series of issues that then hurts and weakens his powers. And yep, that's right. You guessed it, of course, Moon Knight turns out to be one of his long-lost relatives, so Falcon has to rely on his superhuman strength and stamina to outlast Mark Spector in any mutual fight, which is good, because that kind of like levels the playing field. Penultimately, in at number 2, Cactus. Sometimes a name is just a name. It could have meaning, or it could just be something cool that the guy thought of that ended up kind of making sense. Other times, names are extremely direct and are probably too on point. That's the case with Cactus, who is exactly what he sounds like and nothing more. Created by Dominus, he's been a villain of the West Coast Avengers and Moon Knight on various occasions. Punching him definitely stings, but beyond that, it doesn't take all that much to break him or chop him up, because, you know, he's a cactus, which has actually happened before, though he can regenerate lost limbs, which I don't know if cactuses can do or cacti can do, but yeah, he's without a doubt one of the lamest villains in the Marvel Universe, but in my opinion, that makes him one of the coolest. This guy is literally a cactus, and that's hilarious. A couple years ago, the girl I was with at the time and I came up with a superhero that we called Cact Guy, who was basically in essence Cactus. And we didn't know that it was actually a thing, but it's funny to me that someone actually made this and then put it in the goddamn Marvel universe. That's hilarious. That's amazing. And Cactus is my new favorite villain ever because of that. Hashtag Cactus in the MCU. And finally, in the number 1, Hunter's Moon. Dr. Badder was born in Luxor, Egypt to 2 doctors and was an excellent student throughout his life, eventually becoming a doctor as well. He grew to become a very rational and serious person who didn't believe in any higher entities, despite still attending prayer and studying the Quran and the Hadith. This all changed when he was attacked by vampires and left to die on the streets, at which point he met the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Dr. Badder survived and became a worshipper of Khonshu, who fancied himself the god's second highest priest, and opposite of Mark Spector. After learning that Moon Knight had taken in vampires under his protection, Dr. Badder terrorized the Nightwalkers to get his attention. Hunter's Moon eventually confronted Moon Knight, chastised him for taking in enemies of Khonshu, and expressed his intentions to correct him. Dr. Badder beat Moon Knight and invaded the Midnight Mission to kill the vampires, but Spector recovered and knocked him unconscious after attacking him from behind. But you know what, after beating him, I'm not even gonna call it, that's kinda shady. I respect it.
At number 4 is Walrus, another very strange villain based on an animal that seems to have been picked out of a hat. This New York City carpenter's journey in petty crime starts when his uncle gives him powers that marginally increase his strength, speed, and stamina. He takes on the mantle of Walrus and is first shown battling the Defenders in issue 131 in 1984. But he's taken out by a good guy version of Frogman, who at the time is understandably a less respected member of the Defenders. So it really hits home that Walrus is not to be taken seriously, and it also suggests that he was probably never meant to last very long in the first place. Years later, there is an interesting run-in with Deadpool where Walrus gains quite a power boost and actually almost kills Deadpool, but all things considered, he is largely known to be lost to obscurity like the rest on this list. At number 3, we have Big Wheel. Originally taken on by Jackson Wheel, the mantle of Big Wheel is started when he owes money to Rocket Racer, who continues to hound him for payment. So he decides to have an enormous, extremely durable wheel crafted, which is outfitted with machine guns and can be commandeered by a driver. But his first big attack on Rocket Racer goes wrong, and Spider-Man just kind of watches it all go down. Basically, it ends in Big Wheel careening into the Hudson River. But he survives because the wheel is airtight, so he had that covered. Later, Big Wheel reforms himself and even teams up with Spider-Man at one point. Honestly, he's actually somewhere between obscure and quite prevalent, depending on how you look at his legacy, because even though he seldom ever appeared in the Spider-Man comics, he has gone down as one of the most enjoyed obscure villains among Spider-Man fans. Okay, coming in at number 2 is Hypno Hustler. This guy is first introduced in 1978 and has a pretty short shelf life, like 1 issue short. Maybe with a couple more later on, but that's his main introduction. That's the only time we really see him. His powers are basically that he can hypnotize audiences at his shows using his hypnotic guitar. Playing alongside his band, the Mercy Killers, Hypno Hustler is first caught taking money and valuables from others in the audience at what appears to be their own will. But alas, it is hypnosis. He's also got these hypno boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives built into them as well. It's fair to say that this villain doesn't last very long and is sort of left in the dust after this first encounter with Spider-Man. Later, Hypno Hustler has a brief stint with Villainon, which is Villains Anonymous, where he tries to reform alongside the likes of Armadillo and Big Wheel himself. But that's basically it. At number 1 is Video Man. This guy's a double whammy because he is himself a rather obscure villain, all things considered. But also the technology that this character was designed in reference to is also obscure in itself, so I felt I had to put him at number 1 on the list. In fact, Video Man was abandoned so quickly by writers that his origin story is never even revealed. First appearing in the first issue of 2006's Spider-Man Family featuring Amazing Friends, he is quickly taken out after his first encounter and reduced to a little processor unit, which Spider-Man says he keeps in his freezer until, I guess, the present day, so as not to reawaken Video Man. What strikes me as strange about Video Man is that he was conceptualized in 2006, but his style is clearly referential to video games or maybe TV from the 80s or 90s, so just a total miss all around. And we're yet to see him again, after his first fateful encounter in 2006.
Number 5, Emperor Joker. Mr. Mxyzptlk has an extreme level of power, like I said. Also, like I said, if this power fell into the wrong hands, it could be potentially reality ending. Now, what hands could be worse than the psychotic hands of Batman's arch nemesis, the Joker? Well, that's exactly who gets the power in the Emperor Joker storyline. Mr. Mix gets bored and wants to give Joker 1% of his power, just to see the tricks Joker is able to pull off. But instead, the Joker tricks Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his power instead. Joker uses this power to rewrite all of reality to become his sick, twisted dream world. He eats the whole population of China out of a Chinese food container box. He keeps everyone stuck in a time loop, including Batman, who he introduces to the afterlife over and over every day forever. Oh, and he also turned Flash into a slow-moving Abyss Man. Superman, the Spectre, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, being the only ones who can remember the former world, tried to do something about this all-powerful Joker. But that's just the problem. He is all-powerful. He destroys all of reality, but he can't bring himself to destroy Batman fully. And because of this, he loses control of his power, allowing the Spectre and Mr. Mix to steal it back and fix all of reality. But this story it's pretty nuts. Number 4, Condiment King. When the villainous Condiment King came on the scene, it was literally on the scene, as he appeared in the animated Batman TV show from 1992. One of the best, honestly. Condiment King was Buddy Stantler, a comedian who was brainwashed by the Joker into becoming a villain who wields condiment squirters and viciously horrible puns. I knew you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I've relished this meeting. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. Diabolical stuff like that. The puns get even worse in the comics, with his real name becoming a pun on its own. Mitchell Mayo. He isn't taken seriously by anyone. His weapons don't actually project his condiments at a speed fast enough to do anyone harm, but they sure are inconvenient, leaving nasty stains in your superhero costume. On the other hand, he does potentially have the ability to be able to cause anaphylactic shock if he is battling someone with an allergy, right? Number 3, Monsieur Mallah and the Brain. Monsieur Mallah is described in his wiki as a militant, super intelligent French gorilla. The Brain, on the other hand, is described as a genius French scientist and master criminal who exists as a disembodied brain. So, those two descriptions are interesting enough on their own, but when I tell you the French militant gorilla and the disembodied brain are an item together, I think that just elevates the whole thing to a different level. Together, they are the primary leaders of the Brotherhood of Evil, who were villains to both the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans. They both appeared in Doom Patrol 86 in 1964. Now, Brain was once a scientist who experimented on the gorilla who would become Mallah, which would increase Mallah's intelligence. An accident injured Ernst, and Mallah had to remove Ernst's brain and place it in a technological holding thingamajig to keep him alive and be able to communicate. The two are almost always together, with Mallah carrying around the brain. Hey, look, I don't judge. You find love where you find love, but as a concept for supervillains who lead a team of supervillains, you gotta admit, it's pretty odd to say the least. Number 2, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Let me repeat that for all those in the back who may not have heard. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, Man. I don't really have a problem with 2/3 of that. I just get really hung up on the vegetable part. Is that weird? Sven Larsson is the man who claims that title. And while it is a completely ridiculous one, it is actually pretty fitting. Sven fell victim to an experiment of his own making, which allows him to transform into any animal, vegetable, or mineral, either partially or fully, although he very obviously likes to do a bit of all three at the same time, which is an odd choice, but hey, I just work here. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man first appeared in Doom Patrol 89 in August 1964, and he is an enemy to the team, which makes sense given their weirdness. But Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man here has a vendetta against the Doom Patrol's leader, the Chief, who he believed once stole an invention of his. An invention that, funnily enough, is the only way of stopping Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. But he didn't even do that, so no. Look, it gets weirder and weirder, but I gotta move on. Before I do though, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to get out of my system one more time. Number 1, Mr. Mind. I think anyone who hasn't heard of this villain before would be forgiven. When you think of the most fearsome villains, specifically the villains of Captain Marvel, otherwise known as Shazam, you may not first think about the 7-inch long sentient worm from Venus known as Mr. Mind. This diabolically evil mind-controlling worm, after the events of Infinite Crisis, would cocoon himself and then emerge as a massive monstrosity capable of manipulating reality, consuming universes, and traveling through time and space. He was described as eating years and events from this universe's history, altering the Earth with every flap of his wings. It took a combined effort from Booster Gold, Supernova, and Skeets to defeat Mr. Mind by trapping him inside Skeets' shell, which was fortified by the Suspendium. Then, Booster Gold threw Skeets through time with the help of Supernova to the day he was first discovered on Earth by Dr. Sivana, and then he is trapped in a time loop forever. So they didn't even actually end up ending him. They just trapped him. This all-powerful mind-controlling 7-inch long worm.